does it worth for me to do something like a work or a project if I know that somebody's done it before? And Ash said a simple thing, but it kind of made everything clear. He said, don't let anyone who did something before you stop you. It doesn't mean that you can't do it better. And I was like, yeah, this is the thing. This works. Because if you believe that you are to do only original work, you might end up do very little at all, if any. So I feel like it's better to do what you like and put as much of your own passions in the work as you can. And there will be people who will think it is original. At the end, it is just perception.
Please welcome concept designer Eugenia Furs to this episode of the Learn Squared podcast. Eugenia is an amazing artist currently freelancing within the entertainment industry and has a flair for creating brilliant characters. In this episode, we discover how Eugenia switched gears from environment art to character design, and we also go on a deep dive and overall geek out into the world of film and video games, especially how they have shaped Eugenia's interests and the creative landscape overall, and also how addictive they can be. If you love these creative mediums, then you'll definitely love this episode. And be sure to listen out for that key moment that made Eugenia want to embark on the very career she now has. Buckle up and let's go. So going. Okay, hey everyone, welcome back to the Learn Squared podcast. We have an awesome guest today, Eugenia Furs. Hey Eugenia.
Hey, Aaron. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for having you on. So if you'd like to, as we normally do with all of our podcast, is just give everyone a quick intro to yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Eugenia Furs. I am concept designer based in Moscow. I'm really happy to be on the podcast and very excited to have an interesting conversation with Aaron.
Cool. And what do you specialize in? So like on your IG, you've got designer listed, right? And obviously you're a concept designer also. And from the look of your work, obviously it's a lot of hard surface, a lot of characters. But how would you describe the kind of work that you do?
It's quite interesting because I started like years ago. I wanted to be environment concept artist, and I was making environments and kind of trying to do keyframes and this type of stuff. But then I realized that most of the stuff that I like is completely different.
Yeah.
It's mostly characters and sci-fi things, and I was like, something is going on in here. And I just tried to start making characters because maybe it would be something I would like. And I remember at that time on Learn Squared, there is Alex Virginia's course came out.
Yep.
Character design in ZBrush, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, concepting in ZBrush. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right. And I just tried to do the same things in ZBrush, and I just fell into it. I loved it.
Nice.
So yeah, I call myself concept designer. Probably also would call myself concept artist as well. I'm not sure I still entirely understand the difference between these two, but there is a little bit. But yeah, I mostly specialize in characters at the moment, and I find this really interesting job to do.
Nice. Yeah, titles are a funny one because on one hand, sorry, it's just started to rain on my end, so it's probably a fair bit of noise. Yeah, like titles are quite interesting because on one hand, we use them to let our clients know, prospective clients know what we do. And then on the other side, it's also to kind of like, like how like in Game of Thrones, every house had their banners. It's almost like, hey, this is what I do in terms of a speciality. And then the names kind of get mixed and, there's like different combinations of like titles and what have you. And like you mentioned as well, it's like, we tend to end up having, I guess, a bunch of titles that could apply to each of us because, specialize in one aspect, but then could do another aspect. And, probably end up doing the full gamut of all of the I guess the roles that are possible. So it is quite an interesting one with titles. And one thing you just mentioned as well, which I love to hear, is how like you started off with the environments, and then you, like you put it, fell into characters, and then it just went on from there. What was it like for you at that time? Like, why was it environments that perhaps you started off with? And also, like, how was that feeling when you discovered that when you did characters, that hey, that when I guess things started to click, and you thought, well, this is for me. Like, how did that impact you as an artist as well?
This is a great question. Actually, I didn't think about it before. I'm not sure why I started with environments. I guess I've seen it back at that time. More difficult work to do,
Mm-hmm.
like would be more interesting. Even though now that I look at it, it's not really me.
Right,
Um,
right.
but I'll come back to it later. And I tried to do it for quite a while, but again, I was just getting started back then, so there was like no great results, of course. Um, but I was just keep going with it until just something clicked. I remember back then watching a lot of work that Maciej Kuchara did, and
Mm-hmm.
he was my god of concept art. I was looking at him and at his portfolio every day, thinking, "Oh my god, I want to be like him."
Mm,
And I think maybe one things that pushed me to try and have a try in character art is because you see these professional artist portfolios and they rarely have only one thing. You gotta be good at many things.
mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, okay, maybe I should just give it a try because probably somewhere in the future I might just get a work like this.
Mm,
And what if I won't be able to do it? And I tried it, and that was very interesting because somehow I find like character concept artwork, all this exploration, much more freeing for
mm-hmm.
myself because environments is cool, but character is what the person who plays a video game or watching a
Mm,
movie is looking at. The first thing it is the
mm-hmm.
character, and for me, it's just feels like a bit more deeper connection to
Mm,
the product that you're making if it's like a movie or a video game if you design a character, and it's just more freeing for myself to it.
mm. Yeah, I mean that's well put, because you're right. It's like a character in many ways. And I guess that in film and games and all these other mediums, it's always that's the lens we experience. I guess the world, and the overall gameplay and the journey of that particular narrative through a character, right? And it's like, to go, I guess, a bit deeper, just like throughout human history and the huge events that have shaped, like, I guess, written history and all that kind of stuff. It always tends to revolve around an individual or a key person, I guess. Um, so I get, it does make sense that how a character can be so important, and therefore it's probably wise to put a lot of thought into a character when you design it. Um, in terms of experiences of characters, like, what was your experiences, perhaps even growing up or even just now, of iconic characters or experiences where perhaps like you thought that, hey, that is profound, or that person's cool, or like, I want to explore more about this particular individual. Like, what were your experiences that really have really stuck with you, that you could say now probably feed into your work and your philosophies as a designer?
Mm. Well, first thing that came to my mind is like probably one of the most recognizable characters in video games that struck me, and it was like his design and story and plot and everything is I was playing Warcraft 3 since like
Mhm.
I was 6 years old.
Right.
And do you know Arthas? Like
I'm not
the
familiar
Lich
with
King
that.
in the
I'm not
future.
familiar with that game at all, I'm afraid.
All right. I will explain you shortly.
Great, great.
So we have a kingdom in there, and
Yeah.
it's like a part of the huge world. And there is a paladin, a prince, a future king of the kingdom, and his name is Arthas Menethil.
Mhm.
And what happens to him is the dark forces coming, and he wants to protect his homeland. And this drives him to quite weird or not quite good-willed actions,
Mhm.
so as to save his land and his people. And it drives him to become a villain and to
Mm.
become the king of this force of this force he was fighting against. And it shows as a very dramatic and deep story, and his
Mm.
visual design is insane. And I remember how when I've seen this story, um, it just struck me. I completely fell in love with it. I actually, when I started like concept art,
Mhm.
I wanted to work at Blizzard. It is
Mm.
completely different style, and I wanted to be part of this game.
Nice.
Yeah, and he's probably one of the characters that kind of maybe not exactly shaped me,
Right.
but definitely influenced me a lot.
Nice. Like, I guess something or someone that like really got your attention and maybe perhaps like made you think a bit deeper on a normal front, right? Because like I guess normally when we consume stuff, it's just like we consume it, we enjoy it, and then we move on. And then there's some that really kind of just stop you in your tracks and maybe like, especially in a creative sense, it just kind of like takes you on a different journey.
Yeah, I'm all about fantasy in a story. By
Mm.
this, I mean like fantasy of the character, their stories, why they make actions, like why they choose several
Hmm.
things and not. Like if I play video game, I fall into this like RP, I guess you can
Mm.
call it a lot, and this is like what matters to me in
Nice.
the on the first place.
Yeah, I dig that a lot too. It's like I think growing up, one of the ones that I used to play the most was something like Grand Theft Auto, and even like the earlier ones. But that's more like in terms of character. Maybe more in the later ones, they've definitely done that. But in the earlier ones, it's just you. There's no character development at all. It's just a case of run around, go crazy, and that's it. But then later on, as you play more like single player games and like things like Last of Us is one that really jumps out, and even like things like Metal Gear Solid, and there's loads of other games that escape me right now where it's almost on one hand you're playing the character, but then on the other hand you're kind of like observing the character, and you almost not playing the game, if that makes sense. You're just watching and going along the ride of these characters and their journeys, and then like you mentioned, you pick up on you get very familiar with them. You get almost like you relate to them. You kind of understand their motivations or why they are where they are or why they have the flaws that they have. And, like at the end of it, when the game finishes and all that kind of stuff, it's probably that thing which probably sticks with you the most, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And what about like, say, other mediums? Is it mainly games that inspire you, or what about like film, TV, even books?
Oh yeah, I love movies. I can't say that I watched all the classics, but I
Mm.
definitely enjoy movies a lot, and it's still on my bucket list to work on some of them for sure.
What's Do
Um,
you want to reveal any of those lists on the bucket list?
I can you say it again, please?
Do you want to reveal anything on that bucket list?
Oh yeah, Star Wars
Oh,
for
cool,
sure.
cool.
I actually haven't been a huge fan of Star Wars when I was a kid. I just grew
Okay.
up in different environment. Nobody really showed it to me, and I
Right,
was
right, right.
thinking, "Oh man, this movie is so stupid." And this was what I was thinking. I was a Harry Potter girl.
Harry
Like
Potter is awesome.
honestly, I loved it.
Yeah.
But actually, I think that I got involved in Star Wars quite late when I was 15 years old.
Okay.
my friend, back then, it was my school friend, she just made me go and watch the Star Wars Force Awakens, and
Okay.
I was like, fine, it looks kind of nice,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I can't promise you anything. So I watched it and I was like, oh my God, I love it.
So your
And
first Star Wars was Force Awakens.
yes, it was.
Oh. What about like the other? I guess you must have like seen the noises and like obviously like because that's everywhere, right? Like influences, artists speaking about it, and just in general, like I guess the general consciousness it's there a lot. So like, what were your opinions of the older ones, perhaps? Because I guess you got the older ones in terms of prequel trilogy, and then you obviously got the original trilogy as well. So have you
Mhm.
seen them all now to this point?
Yeah, I have. I
Okay.
watched them. Um, I like them a lot. They got this kind of vibe that movies we got now, they just don't have it.
Yes.
Um, because I guess they made with much more less CGI.
Hmm.
They just got much more soul. Feels like they got more soul and work put into them for some reason.
And although I don't like doing this when there's like a sequence or a series of films set in the same universe, although they are individual stories, they are separate films, and like people do rank them in certain ways, which is natural. Um, but like, do you have any that you kind of like hold in higher regard than others, or do you kind of just see it like the way I do? It's just like it's like I guess different chapters in one overall like arc or world or whatever.
Um, it is a good question because I do feel like we live in a society where I guess because of money making machines, people get used that the story never ends, heroes never die, and you get sequels of the
Mm,
movies you like or TV series you like to watch almost every year
hmm.
or every 3 years. It doesn't matter anyway, you know that something will come out next.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, as just statistics shows, it's not a promise that the story will be better.
Mm,
Because if it's just driven by making money, it's usually not a good product. I'm not
hmm.
talking about Star Wars right now. I'm just
Yeah,
talking
sure.
about pretty much everything. But
Yeah.
because Force Awakens was my first Star Wars movie that I watched and I really liked, I I hold it close to my heart, even
Nice.
though,
Nice.
as far as I know, like OG fans and not really warming up to this
Yeah. Yeah.
trilogy. And I can say I quite like the two movies that came after that.
Hmm.
I feel like Last Jedi was interesting take. I felt
Mm,
like there was something else going on that director tried to pull.
hmm.
And at first I hated it, like all this humor in the movie and
Yeah. Yeah.
things. But then I looked into it and we actually could have a cool possibility, for example, of Frey turning to the dark side,
Mm,
or Ben coming back to the light side. And I thought that would be such a cool drop because this is not what happens in the movies often or
yeah.
happens at all, because we got the stigma of black and white and it always will be that way.
Yes. Yes.
And I feel like if it is a good thing, like a story to show to the kids,
Hmm.
we got villain and a good guy. Uh, in real life it's not like that. It's more like a gray.
Mm,
Everything should be balanced. And of course Star Wars is not about real life, but I was thinking that it could be a really cool trope to do, but unfortunately they didn't went that way. And for me personally, the last movie is a complete disaster. um but yeah, I
Y-
feel like I won't say that it was a mistake or they shouldn't have done it, to continue on the story.
yeah.
It's always nice to see, especially about Star Wars, but we got Mandalorian, and
Yes.
Mandalorian is great. I
Yes.
love it. I
Yes.
watched it and it is amazing.
Yeah. Now I agree with you on a lot of points. There's a few things like that you mentioned that are quite interesting as well, because like for myself, I think my first Star Wars experience is much very young, much younger than yourself, and this was back in the VHS days, and I think we recorded Return of the Jedi, and So that was my first Star Wars film. So I kind of watched those three films in reverse. Then the second one was Empire Strikes Back, and then for some reason, the first one, New Hope, never came on. And then when I did watch it, that was when they re-released it, when they remastered it, and I watched it in the cinemas. So that was my first Star Wars in the cinemas experience. But overall, like for myself, what I love about Star Wars is not so much the films themselves, it's so much the universe that's been created. And like, you just dream about the worlds that they uncover, the machines and the vehicles and the characters and where they're from and how they're made, and then I would make this if that was in that case, and blah 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 blah. And that's for me, like, throughout all the films. Maybe not so much on the later ones, but that's just me being like critical. Maybe I'm just getting grumpy and old. But throughout, at least that's kind of always been there, like that world building, that exploration of, like, all these different characters and races and this vast universe that has all these things happening and moving around. And what's interesting as well is when you look at the new trilogy that came out, the episode 7, 8, and 9, all the noise. And it's another thing as well is those are the first Star Wars films I experienced whilst the internet was around and the others were not. So I think that definitely had an impact in my viewing experience, for better and worse as well. And when they came out, obviously, whether I like to, especially with those kind of films and anything that I have a connection to, when they do have like a sequel to it, I try to be as like open-minded when I go into the film as possible. And a lot of the time it works, sometimes it doesn't. But for these Star Wars films, it's kind of like, I am very forgiving of them. But at the same time, I still had that baggage. So, whether I liked it or not, I was always comparing to maybe previous ones, or I enjoy this moment in this film. I want to see a better moment that can replace that. And you're always looking for that yearning of something greater than you had before. So it's quite interesting that, like, sorry, just to make my point again. So when I watched the prequel trilogy, I love them because of the age I watched them and the moments they had. And looking back at it now, again, as an artist and a designer and someone who likes to critique certain things, just to understand how to make something good myself, I can appreciate all the criticisms that come of those films. But nevertheless, I still enjoyed them. But I also understood why there was that kind of like disdain or like rejection of those films because of the attachment people had to the other ones. It took me a while to understand that, but I understood why. And then obviously now with these films, I kind of get it at the same time, but at the same time, I'm still like, yeah, but it's Star Wars, so for me they're accepted. So it's interesting that for yourself, as that was your first Star Wars film, a lot of other people who had that history, like, don't tend to talk warmly about Force Awakens, right?
Mhm.
And maybe that is because of all that baggage. And it'd be interesting, like, if someone can make this device where you can kind of delete your preconceptions and your, I guess, thoughts on a particular franchise before you watch a film, how that would impact it, because technically that's how you watched it, right? You had none of that, opinions and baggage and all that kind of stuff. And for yourself, it was something that you enjoy, you love. So that means, as a filmmaker and the filmmakers and the team that were involved, when you make something, you kind of make it assuming that your audiences never seen or understood or watched this before. So therefore, for yourself, it worked. So that's quite interesting in terms of like a creativity point. But yeah, that's a long point I just made. A bit of a ramble there. But what's your take on that? So, like, has there been anything that you've watched which you had expectation for based on previous films and it kind of didn't deliver, or vice versa?
Let me process this because it was a long point.
Yeah.
I do definitely agree with you, and I'm interested. What would I think about Star Wars prequels and just earlier movies if I watched it as a kid?
Mm.
I have the same thing with Harry Potter
Hmm.
because that was my Star Wars.
Yes, yes, yes.
It's just happened that way. My parents, they haven't been Star Wars fans. They haven't been into this particular type of movies at
Yeah.
all. But I just somehow happened to have all the Harry Potter DVDs and
Hmm.
stuff. And the last movie, I believe, came out 2012 or 13. I was
Yeah,
like
yeah.
12 years old.
Wow.
So um, that was great. And it could be Star Wars instead of Harry Potter. And I
Hmm.
would be interested to see, would I like the new trilogy or not?
Mm.
It's definitely first time you see it, your environment, who you are as a person, like is definitely experience is different if you're eight
Yeah, yeah,
years
yeah.
old or
Yeah.
you're like 16. So it matters a lot. It's like, people with video games, these 30 years old or 40 years old
Hmm.
men who like bring our 15-year-old game back. We want it to be the same.
Mm.
But then it happens and it's never the same because experience is never the same. Now you are
Mm.
much more older, you get kids, you can't spend in a video game like 24 hours a day.
Yes,
And
yes.
almost the same thing with the movies, I guess. Um, but yeah, it is definitely a good point, and I agree with you, for sure. Now to think about the new things that came out and did it hold to my expectations. Oh, like I can talk about Harry Potter then.
Yeah.
Fantastic Beasts, we had them, and I was very disappointed. I was waiting for it so much, and first of all, they had different cast. In Harry Potter, they
Yeah,
had
yeah.
cast that people almost didn't know, like they had Alan Rickman in there
Mm.
and some other people as well. But main heroes, they were unknown basically, and that
Mm.
was what was cool about it. But then in Fantastic Beasts, they bring a lot of actors that we've seen before,
Hmm.
and it's already getting a bit like I've seen him before, and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
got this
yeah.
baggage of how much you know about this actor, where he has or she has been, all these things. And
Right, right, right.
apart from this, it's I feel like it is just the thing of me getting old because in old movies you get used to the effects, like the effects looking the
Yes,
same way,
yes.
the camera shots, everything. And in the new movies, everything is different. Like you can definitely see the progress made in filmmaking, and you
Uh-huh.
can say right away, oh, this movie came 15 years ago, and oh, this movie just came
Yeah,
out in the
yeah.
cinema, because there are certain trends and things like that. And it kind of, I've started to notice that it's not that it's putting me off, but nowadays movies look way too clean. They look
Mm.
just perfect, and it's a little bit, I don't know. It doesn't make me think bad about the movie, but
Hmm.
sometimes it just not makes it less believable for me. I guess it just takes away this kind of romanticism about movie. I don't know why.
Mm.
Maybe apart from sci-fi movies because they're kind of supposed to be that way, I guess. But again, we got like Star Wars, but Star Wars is a bit different.
Yeah, yeah. That is an interesting one actually. And I mean, like, would you say that's too clean more or less only in CGI heavy films, or just overall, that all genre of films?
It depends really because there is still directors who, for example, shoot on film, and
Mm.
it always looks good in film.
Yeah, yeah, for
But
sure.
I guess it's not about everything. Like what movie I like that came out not long ago? Oh, Knives Out. Ryan Johnson
Oh,
is director,
I'm still
if
holding
I
off
am
on that.
right.
Yeah, I really want to watch that. I haven't seen it yet though.
Oh, I need to be careful with spoilers. I
Oh,
love
please don't. Yeah, that's
this.
no, don't. Yeah, no,
I
I
just
really
gonna
want to.
say that.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, sorry. I just gonna say that the movie looks amazing.
yeah,
Costumes look amazing.
yeah.
The set design is insane. It's just gorgeous,
Yes.
and I really hope you're gonna like it. Especially like I've never been into whodunit movies, like detective stories,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
this movie got me into it. It made me watch Clue, and I
Oh,
also
okay,
fell
okay,
in
okay,
love with
okay.
that.
Wow.
It's definitely worth watching. I recommend. And they were shooting everything on film, and oh, am I gonna lie if I'm gonna say that? There was some kind of a trick they did with the lighting,
Mhm.
like natural lighting from the windows.
Mm.
That was very cool. And they shoot everything. Like the first floor of the house, the ground floor, I believe you call it,
Yeah, yeah.
is shot in the exact house, like that they portray on
Oh,
the
wicked,
outside, which is
wicked.
also cool.
Yeah, I love those little bits of trivia, like when just little like filmmaking techniques. Basically, just to summarize it quickly, is that when someone has made a film or anything, and you can see that they've put a lot of effort into capturing their vision, as opposed to just finding. It's like when you make art, like workflow is important. Finding the best solution or even the quickest solution is sometimes key, but sometimes you can fall into the trap of just doing things that are just the easiest approach or the quickest approach, but maybe don't, I guess, lead to the best design. And sometimes you do have to kind of like do things that maybe require a bit more effort, a lot more energy, but they lead to better results, right? And
Yeah.
like when you see things like that, like where they've actually put effort into, like take Lord of the Rings for example, where they pushed, in my opinion, like CGI in the early 2000s, like they were key and responsible for like what CGI became afterwards. I know the prequel trilogy did that as well. So they kind of both had huge influences on that. In the same way, the original Star Wars films really pushed the realm of just general special effects, and how that can really make a blockbuster film. But at the same time, they had like the bigatures, the miniatures. They put a lot of effort into prop making. Just basically, they got it in the sense of whether it's digital, whether it's practical, we'd want to make this experience authentic as much as possible, right? So yeah, like little things when you hear like natural light, like again, we're both involved in CGI, so we know what it's like when lighting works and when it doesn't work and how that can really impact a piece. And we all know that when you get natural lighting something, it's always the best. So when I see people employ that technique, it's just super, super fun to hear. But Ryan Johnson seems like I haven't seen all of his films, but I think the first one that I watched was Looper. I really enjoyed it, and I really want to watch Knives Out. Just gotta find time. But yeah, I've always been like, he's someone that excites me as a filmmaker. Like, is for me, he's an exciting filmmaker, and by the sounds of it, I believe he got a really big Netflix deal after these Knives Out films. So they seem to have struck a chord with a lot of people.
Yeah. If I'm right, I heard that they're making second part of Knives Out.
Yeah, I think he's got like a couple of films on that. But for someone like him, I would just say, like if I was a studio exec, what do you need? Here's your paycheck. Just go make what you need to make.
Yeah, I agree. He is definitely got a lot of potential to see. And like, if we compare the Last Jedi movie and Knives Out,
Yeah.
I've been reading some articles where people say like, "Oh, he learned and he grew."
See, for me, what's your take on that?
Like,
Like, do you agree with that point?
I think I do. It's a bit hard for me to compare these two because they are very different
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
everything. But the only thing that I hated in Last Jedi, I guess, is the jokes, but
Right,
also
right, right.
unnecessary scenes with Finn and Rose. Rose, she was
Yeah, yeah,
Rose,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Where they were like doing like this horses stuff and everything.
yeah,
I was
yeah,
like, why do you show me this? It's
yeah,
not connected to
yeah,
anything whatsoever.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, I just tend to not look at it, and I was just hoping that something interesting would happen with Ray,
Mm-hmm.
especially she went into this cave. And the moment in the cave was so cool with like in
Yeah,
the mirror, she was
I
looking in
dig
the
that.
mirror,
Yes,
like,
yes.
yeah, infinite the pictures and stuff. Like, I loved it. That was really cool. But it's quite hard for me to compare these movies. But
Mm,
if I just say that Knives Out feels like such a smooth and brilliant product,
mm,
and there is really nothing that I would take out or put into it. It fits very well into the genre. It brings something new anyway. And the plot is amazing. It's not a heavy movie. It's quite light to watch. And I feel like it explains everything very well to the viewer, but not to the point where the viewer is supposed to be like stupid that they explain it that much. I love it in the movies when they don't explain some jokes or, something that happened.
Yes.
Because sometimes it's very annoying. This is what they started to do in Mandalorian, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Like, I loved the first series because, like, episodes, you call it episodes. He used to be so quiet and he never explained anything to you where you kind of needed to think. But then they kind of started to abandon this thing and they started to explain more and more. I still don't understand why they decided to do this.
Yeah, it's
but
like
that felt amazing.
No, yeah, I totally agree with you on that. It's I think it's something that I'm with you. It's like when I see it happening, it's like, oh, please don't do this. Like, I don't need to hear this. But at the same time, I totally get why they do it because they're trying to, I guess, like maybe it was not maybe a creative decision, but maybe like an executive decision, quote unquote, to say like, hey, look, we need to make sure we don't alienate everybody. Like, there's some people who do want that. Because I've spoken to people who actually love that, where they actually want to hear, they want everything to be spelt out and laid out so they can just, enjoy the rest. They don't want to be like dwelling in, I guess, those areas where you're thinking, hold on, is that what they meant? Or did this actually mean this? Which for me is like, that's where the magic is really at. So I guess they're trying to like cover all bases. But then looking back, like say, at the first original 3 Star Wars films, like I felt a lot of that, especially in the first one, that was like season 1 of Mandalorian. It had a lot of those moments where not much was said, not much was revealed. In fact, in terms of the lore of Star Wars, I'm sure some Star Wars experts will completely correct me on this, but there's not much expanded upon the lore of the universe Star Wars in the first film. It's just names of worlds or species or ships, and that's it. Not really much more expansive about that apart from the Force. And that's probably what makes it great as well, because it gets your brain thinking, what does this actually mean? And you go into all these different areas. But then I think there's also a point when it's done really, really well. Have you seen the film There Will Be Blood?
I heard about it, but I'm not sure I've seen it, to be honest.
Daniel Day-Lewis. It's basically about an oil baron. But it's a masterpiece, straight up. Are you familiar with Paul Thomas Anderson, the director?
I'm bad with the names.
He did The Master with Joaquin Phoenix, and then Magnolia, I think, and a few others.
Oh, all right. All right.
Definitely want to check out. He's basically like someone, when he makes a film, it probably gets nominated for an Oscar, multiple Oscars, or someone acting in his films will win an Oscar for it. But in that film, basically, he's like, this is not so much a spoiler, but he's basically in the age in America where they were like prospecting for like oil and stuff. So before oil was discovered and basically changed the world, right? It's one of those films where people like, they probably tell students to study in school, make people to write essays on. But there's a moment in there where he's addressing a town as town meeting, and basically he's trying to convince them to give him their land so he can drill oil. But the way it's expertly done is, although he's addressing the crowd, he's actually, the way they've written it and the way they directed it is actually addressing the audience, explaining to you, hey, this is what oil people do. This is what they had to deal with, where they had to basically go on people's land, convince them so they can take the oil and make lots of money. So it's literally spelling it out for the viewer, but it's done in such an expert way where even though I knew it was happening, it was still awesome. It didn't take me out of the experience. So there's definitely like, room and methods where you can still do that kind of thing, where you can explain to the audience, give them the answers, so to speak, but in a way where it's like, it's just super smooth. So I'd highly recommend watching that film.
Sounds really interesting. I definitely gonna watch it. I was going to. It was like on my Netflix save later, I
Oh, for
believe so.
sure. Yeah.
But yeah, there is so much movies to watch and
Oh,
not
I
quite
know. I
a
know.
lot of times, especially considering my video game addictions.
So
Not much at all.
when did you realize? Because I'm someone who, like, I'm definitely a video game addict to the point where I gave away so I haven't played a console or owned a console since the PS3, purely because I knew like how destructive it is for my time and productivity. And it's something that like that's like I think approaching 8, 9 years, let's say nearly a decade, right? I think maybe. Anyway, let's say over 5 years. I know for a fact that if I bought a console now, even though it's a big lapse of time, I would 100% relapse and play unhealthy amount of hours. So like, when did you realize you're a video game addict?
Oh, I feel like I've been this all my life. It started when I was 6.
Right.
My dad, he was playing Warcraft 3 on like, these very old fat PCs.
Yeah.
And I was just watching. I was like, oh, that looks interesting.
Mm.
And that was it. He also was playing Sniper Light game back then, like a lot of World War II games.
Right.
And so I kind of grew up on these violent games. And I've been playing them all the time. Like, I remember there was, when I got a bit older, I was addicted to Nancy Drew video games. Like, it is
Okay.
basically little video games for girls, like that you are detectives
Yeah.
and you need to find clues and do all this stuff. It's sweet old games, and I basically was playing like all my life. Then it escalated to
As always.
to more serious video games, and then I'm here. Now I'm just playing mostly Apex Legends and
Okay.
sometimes World of Warcraft. Yeah.
And like how, because I think on one hand, it does both, right? Like it influences your art and it affects it. Like how does it impact you as a creative?
It definitely made a huge impact on me, because we got like so much inspiration in video games. I don't know any artist who wouldn't get inspired from
Mm.
the product because it makes you inspired. It helps you to set your goals, like your probably professional goals, like, oh, I want to work on this, or I want to work
Yeah.
on this. This is how I realized that I want to be a concept artist,
Mm.
but it was not about video game. It was about movie. Like,
Mhm.
my dad took me to London, and on my birthday, my 14th birthday, we went to the Harry Potter big studio in
Mm.
London where they put all the props, everything in
Wow.
there, and they had a huge room, and it was all covered in drawings and concept art and like,
Wow.
this kind of architecture sketches of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
villages and little houses. And I was looking at like, oh my God, I want to do this. I
Wow.
remember this moment so clearly.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I feel like that was the turning point for me.
Wow.
Before that, I remember I wanted to be started from like cloth design and
Oh,
ending with
cool.
a
Cool. Cool.
fighter pilot. There was a lot of stages.
Yeah. Well, looking at your work, it's kind of all those things combined, right? Like there's like definitely that fighter pilot vibe, definitely the fashion vibe, and definitely like the movie magic, games, and that all that kind of stuff. So like I guess your influences, even till now, like your work now, is that something that's like something that you just let occur naturally, or do you deliberately kind of like make the work and the artwork and the forms and all that kind of stuff you make?
Uh, I feel like I definitely push some of it in
Mm-hmm.
my work because I want to get towards the point when I make, well, obviously no art is original, but I want to
Mm.
put as much me as I can. And, with every year of my life, I kind of understand what is it me more and more, what I
Mm.
like, what I look at. And yeah, what many people said about my art is that it's dark for some reason. I
Yeah.
guess probably just because every second of my artwork is on black background, I guess. But I definitely like this kind of realistic, but equally, a bit moody, a bit
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
dark style of anything really. If we go to sci-fi or cloth or like even I made a night the few months ago, and
Yeah, yeah.
I just got so inspired from Mortal Shell, and I
Oh,
know that
such a sick thing.
this is like a
Yeah.
huge tribute to Dark Souls, and I gave Dark Souls a fair shot, but
Yeah.
this game, like the gameplay is not quite for me. It requires too much time and effort. It's a bit too much for me. But I
Uh-huh.
love the setting. I love the world, this dark fantasy vibe. I just love it. And what I did in my work, I called it Bane of the Fallen King. I merged it with my passion for World of Warcraft,
Mhm.
and I wanted to make a version of World of Warcraft Death Knight, but in this kind of
Right,
more
right.
realistic dark fantasy vibe. Because obviously, I'm not going to make it in like World of Warcraft style.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's not what I do.
Oh, that's sweet,
So
man.
yeah, I'm trying to put my interests and my passions into my work
Mhm.
for sure. Like one of the works that I'm planning to do is fighter pilot work
Sick.
as well. Yeah, I wanted to mix it with some racing stuff, like
Ooh.
Formula One, things like this, and make
Yeah.
kind of a mix of these two worlds. That could be fun.
Sounds like one of my ideas I got cooking, so that's cool, man. It would be cool to see how yours turns out.
Yeah, I definitely believe that there is not many of original ideas left, and the more I kind of, it's a bit weird. The more I look on ArtStation nowadays, the less I see mm, very different works in terms of style. I
Mhm.
feel like because so many people use the same tools and striving for this realism in their work that it is all kind of blurs together, if you know what I
Mm.
mean.
Yes. Um, that is something that's quite an interesting one. Is that like I guess originality is a concept, right? Because we all strive for it. It's important because the things that we've all even in the podcast that we've spoke about today, some of the stuff that's been really stand out is what you would perhaps qualify as original because it just stands out, is separate. Um, and this is something that I've wrestled with a lot, and I guess something that you will continue to wrestle with because is anything really original? And maybe something that is original, you'd never recognize it because we need something that's a callback, right, to something that we need that we can relate to. That would be like for example, like say the aliens in District 9. They're very alien, but they look like crustaceans and creatures that we are familiar with on planet Earth. So therefore, we can kind of like, without even being in their space, kind of imagine what their texture would feel like, and all that kind of stuff. Um, so yeah, like I always think, is it an exercise in just being clever and disguising the use of like everything's a remix, right? Do you remix in a way where you use the same ingredients but kind of do it in a different combination, or is there actually genuinely something original? I mean, what's your take on that?
Um, I feel like there is definitely some originality
Mm.
that comes to, because we got our different experiences. Some people just got this genius,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm not a big fan of this, like talent or genius, but
yeah.
the more I kind of live, the more I see that sometimes it pops up. Some people just have it, some people
Mm.
just insane. But if I talk about myself, like my point of view on this is whatever we see in nature, it's there and it is intended to be, and you can try and make it original,
Mm.
but it's already there.
Yes.
And it can be original for one person who sees it because they never seen it before,
Yeah, yeah.
or it can be completely normal for somebody else. Like, for example, if you show somebody's work to the person who is not in the industry, they'll be like, oh my God, that's so cool. I've never
Yeah,
seen it
yeah, yeah,
before.
yeah.
Or just if you put it in the movie. But every artist will be like, seen it.
Hmm.
It's like,
Yes.
I know dozens of artists who done it. What are you
Yeah.
trying to pull up in here? So it's definitely depends on the person. You know,
Mm.
it can be original for somebody else it cannot. But for me, what I'm trying to do, I was thinking a lot about this and talking to people about this,
Yeah.
like, does it even worth to do work if somebody done it before? But
Yeah.
I remember, I just, I remember I've seen it on Instagram. I was looking at Ash Thorpe
Hmm.
stories, and it was time when somebody was asking him questions and he was responding. And somebody asked this, like, does it worth for me to do something like a work or a project if I know
Mm.
somebody's done it before? And Ash said a simple thing, but it kind of made everything clear. He said, don't let anyone who did something before you stop you. It doesn't mean that you can't do it better.
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, this is the thing. This works.
Yes.
Because if you believe that you are to do only original work, you might end up do very little at all, if
Yes.
any.
Yes.
So I feel like it's better to do what you like and put as much of your own passions in the work as you can. And there will be people who will think it is original. At the end, it is just perception, you
For
know?
sure. Yeah. I think that's definitely the realization that a lot of people would end up coming to is you know it, like they say, the beauty's in the eyes of the beholder, right? It's always the case. But then in that case, what is the point, so to speak? Like, what should people really aim for? And then what you just mentioned there, what Ash said, is this case of just keep creating, because if you do what you love, then and do what you're passionate about, that's it. That's all you need to worry about. You can keep creating, and then eventually things either will click, or you will make something that resonates, that connects. Like maybe the focus is less about trying to do something in a way that stands out, more so in a way that connects. So that gets people like drawn to it. And as the perfect example of something that's constantly been done over and over again is sci-fi, right? Like my personal preference is sci-fi, and everything you could say has been kind of done and explored. Yet there's still so many sci-fi projects coming out, and there's so many different takes on it, and there's always some that really stand out and really really connect. Um, and it's like, would you say there's perhaps an advantage to doing something that's kind of been done before, at least in a subject matter? Because I guess there's like proven, in a technical sense, maybe there's proven workflows. In a more stylistic sense, there's like certain looks that have been done. So you think, I'm going to steer away from that because that's kind of been done. So I know I can focus on maybe that gray area there that no one's explored. And then I'm going to make something great out of that. Like, would you say that's maybe an advantage in a sense of doing something? So let's say maybe somebody is put off thinking that, I don't want to do a space opera type project because there's a Star Wars that's kind of considered the icon of that, and there's so many others that have tried and failed to do it. Like, why should I go ahead and enter that universe? But then, because there's, you could say, so much data on that universe, on that kind of realm of that space, that creative space, then you've got a lot more information to fall back on, a lot more ideas you can maybe explore that no one else has. Like, that could perhaps be an advantage, right?
Um, I agree with you. It is an interesting question because, on one hand, I feel like I guess it depends on what your end goal is.
Mm.
Like, what is the project? Your end goal is very important. But I feel like if you go very original and you want it, it's fine. But I keep noticing that people are a bit more warmer towards the thing they're familiar with.
Mm.
Because, for example, what comes to my mind is we can take the original Blade Runner movie.
Yeah.
it set up the genre. It was amazing. Like I watch it and I'm just shocked by how old this movie is, but it still makes such an insane impression because I feel like there is not much movie being done in that way
Yes.
anymore.
No,
It's
no, there
just
isn't.
so deep. There is so many questions. Well, I can call it one of a kind. Maybe it's not a good example for such a broad topic, but anyway, people didn't it didn't do well.
Yes.
Like you can't say is the movie good or bad based on the money, because it's not the case completely. Popular things doesn't mean that they are good quality.
Yeah.
It never works that way.
Mhm.
But a lot of people just didn't get it. And I feel like if what you want to do, like your project, you just want to explore things, you want to do it because you like, especially if it's like your personal project, I
Mm.
think you can just go ahead and do it. And I would respect that. And I would respect it even more if it was some kind of a big commercial project, because I feel like, I'll be honest, I just feel like everything is the same these days. Each and every movie, so often, like when it comes to sci-fi, I just watch it and it's just all the same,
Yeah.
most of them.
I
And
I agree with you on that as well.
yeah, it doesn't feel great. It feels like it feels like you want some water and you're so thirsty, but there is nothing.
Yes.
There is absolutely nothing.
Yeah, that's a great example. I like I'm the same. It's I think I've mentioned this before in another episode. It's like growing up, the things that only because it came on TV, because maybe that's only was worthwhile in a business sense for those networks to purchase the rights for that particular film. It was only blockbusters, your big high budget films, or the ones that did well in the box office that came on. But then whilst growing up, it was things like, Jurassic Park, your Terminators, and all those kind of films that were like widely considered that they're very entertaining, that they're amazing, and all that kind of stuff. And although I still pine for that, like, I still want to have that same experience when I first watched Jurassic Park for the first time, or like the same thing you experienced when you went to the studio where they're making Harry Potter. It's like that kind of movie magic, right? And you kind of want it replicated, whether it's in a different story or a different kind of genre, but you want to feel that kind of same way. So every time like a big budget film comes out, only I just use that as an example because like the ones that I've enjoyed in the past were perhaps considered big budget, like films, like big budget in the sense of when James Cameron gets a big budget, he's going to hire the best designers, he's going to hire the best artists and professionals to help craft his vision. So you always assume that when you see these big budgets, that's where the money's going to go. Yet when they release, there's very few that I watch and I think, okay, that's had the same impact on me, like Jurassic Park or Lord of the Rings, or the Harry Potters are a great example. Like my daughters started watching them now, and even now, they're still timeless because they have that element of wonder, storytelling, that escapism that a lot of these blockbuster films kind of tend to should have in them, because that's kind of like what really attracts an audience. But yeah, there's a few that happen that seem to, but they're very, very few and far between. And what I tend to find is what really draws me now, or really gets me excited in terms of film, are things that are not that kind of type of film, like low budget indie, done by visionary creators who have like a tight knit team and they know what they want. They're very creative. They explore other realms that you never would perhaps think or would never do in a blockbuster. So maybe I'm just clinging on to my childhood. I don't know. But like, do you think, like, what do you think's missing then in that sense? Like, why would you say these kind of like films and big budget films, especially sci-fi films or heavy VFX films, like, why is it that they're not connecting anymore in terms of, like, say, a creative or a profound sense? Is it maybe the fact that like big budget studios have kind of held that genre to ransom now, and all they're doing is just working the formula? I don't know. What do you think?
To be honest, I do feel like our society is driven by money these days, and
Mm.
when it comes to big Hollywood budget movies, I do feel like 95% out of them are made by the formula to just drive, these people who are not very much into the movies and they just there to enjoy their day, enjoy their
Yeah.
time, get like they're tired of working and they need something to chill on.
Hmm.
I feel like there is most of the movies made that way these
Mm.
days, especially if we talk about sci-fi, because yeah, sci-fi movies right now they look the best they ever have,
Yes.
but they're just sometimes I was in the cinema actually yesterday. I went with my mom to watch Cruella
Okay.
and didn't expect anything from the movie. Came out quite good to be honest,
Cool.
but it's not the movie, like it's not sci-fi, so I'll leave it.
Yeah.
But I've seen a lot of like um ads for movies before the Cruella started,
Yeah.
and there was like a sci-fi movie. I didn't even remember its name, but it just was so flashy. Like my eyes were hurting to see how much stuff was going on in there.
Yeah.
There was so stupid, and I was like, no, I'm not giving my money to go and watch this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I find a lot of movies these days like they just look like this and just not fun. I feel like it doesn't work, I guess. The plot is always the same.
Mm.
It's just different characters, different settings, but the plot usually the same, and
Mm.
it is just feels like you watch the same stuff over and over again, just with different names on it. And I feel like same thing, uh, maybe not as much, but probably depends on the genre of video games these days.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
money, I feel like money definitely drives the big studios much more than it was before, because a
Hmm.
lot of investors, a lot of people who are outside this industry don't know, like, oh my God, like games bring so much money because there are
Mm.
always like huge whales who are ready to spend thousands of dollars on
Yes.
a free
Yes.
video
Yes.
game.
Yes.
And they come in there and they invest their money, and obviously they got a huge word and they got a lot of leverage on the game production.
Yeah.
And a lot of the systems in games made that way that they just hold you up in there as long as possible. So
Mm.
you just play the game. It's like same thing with like World of Warcraft these days. I don't play it anymore
Right.
because the systems in game just made to hold you in there. So you
Mm.
pay the subscription fee. There's nothing more. And a lot of like games in the same genre, they're all the same.
Mm.
It's just systems to make you pay money, and there is no good plot, nothing. I remember like when the game came out in 2005, your main objective was to, do some quests and then kill some bosses, do some raids, and just get the gear. That's
Mm.
it. Now it is a system on a system on a system, and it
Yeah.
feels like you just waste your time. And I remember I was watching some stream of a person who was playing this game, and he said a very cool thing about video games. And he said that in the bad video game, you feel like you just waste your time, whilst in a good video game, it should be the game where you want to waste your time on it.
Yes. Yes.
And I feel like it is a great description. And these days, it just falls a bit more towards indie studios for me. I'm not
Mm.
saying that the big studios don't make good games. There is a lot of good games made by big studios, but what I noticed is it's usually a single player games. If it is a multiplayers, it always, at least to some degree, a money maker.
Yeah. 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 That seems to be the case. It's like the ones that like you can spend money on, where you mentioned it's a subscription, or it's a case of you got to buy gear and all that kind of stuff. It's repetitive, right? There's no really end to it. It's just a case of like online games or what have you, massive multiplayer. They tend to be like, I guess, the money maker. They're the ones that kind of bring in the bucks, and then the single player games, they are the ones that perhaps are the best experience, but because of the nature of them, like I remember growing up, like the longer a game was to complete, that got me more excited because I was going to spend more time in that world and I'd have to complete and then leave, kind of thing. Whereas I think that's like a statistic that they're trying to avoid now, because and I might be wrong in this, but I'm pretty sure that's the conclusion I got from what I was checking out at the time, was that, like a single player game where there's no DLCs you need, there's no content you need to purchase to complete the game, that's kind of like money down the drain, versus a type of game where the more time you play it, the more likely you spend money in there. But they're the ones that you kind of just mentioned that are not really the ones that are connecting with audiences in a way, where they're kind of, like you said, it's just more like a waste of a time, unintentionally, as opposed to intentionally wasting your time. But then at the same time, it does look like I'm the same. It's like naturally I'm drawn to whatever tends to, it's naturally like you're drawn to whatever excites you. And it does seem to be in indie games and indie developers that do have that license to, I guess, explore different areas that we mentioned before. You want to see something original, something that you haven't experienced before, or just something great in a familiar setting. And if you've got like a huge studio, which has, I guess, shareholders and expectations and all that kind of stuff, then it is more likely to follow a formula. But at the same time, if everything was indie, would everything be great? Like, is it the fact that the big studios and where the money's at is kind of like supporting in an indirect, maybe a direct way, the fact that like there is a space now where it's super creative? I don't know. But where do you think it's heading now? Like, where do you think the originality will come from? Like, do you think it's all going to slowly just fizzle away? Or do you think maybe in terms of Blockbuster or just in general, like where do you think great ideas will occur in the future? Would it be in games? Would it be in films now? Would it be something else?
I feel like games and movies. It obviously depends on the genre, but I feel like actually I might be wrong. What my point is, I feel like in the future, quite soon, games are gonna be like movies, and movies might be like video games. I feel like what it's gonna come into is that the person is going to be absolutely immersed into it. You can call
Yeah.
it VR or whatever. But if we talk about original ideas, there is always going to be something.
Yeah.
But if the world will go down the way it goes now and everything's going to be driven by marketing and just the goal to make more money,
Yeah.
I feel like the quality of what people will be used to, like the quality of the products, I feel like it will be getting lower, and people are just going to get used that, you gotta pay money for this and that, and just the quality of the content in the big video games, for
Yeah.
sure. But again, it's always multiplayer because you always compare yourself to other players in this type of video games.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
competitiveness. You
Yeah.
want to have cooler stuff than them. You want to have higher stats. That's why you
Yes.
play more and things like this. So what I hate is when I feel like I'm being manipulated
Yeah.
and uh, like developers trying to trap me,
Mm-hmm.
like what was with World of Warcraft. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it is a very big thing right now with Blizzard because everyone is kind of losing their hope in this company, like
Mm-hmm.
good old days, and now it's very different. And there's a lot of speculation going on why a lot of developers are quitting and things like this.
Mm.
Um, but I'm not going to talk about this in here.
That's
What I'm
okay.
saying is there is definitely going to be influence of this whole thing in there, and movies, video games. Like we got it everywhere. It's not just it's not just entertainment industry. It's like this kind of formula works everywhere,
Yeah.
And it might be a bit of pessimistic view, but I'll be honest, I'm not very positive about many things at the moment. In this regard, to me, it just feels like world is going down
Yeah.
in
So,
many things, and
so a couple of things
yeah.
I want to ask based on that is, firstly, like just to wrap up the point of, I guess, the state of, I guess, the industry and just overall creativity in the entertainment industry, like in the commercial aspect. But has there been anything that does follow those formulas that we just mentioned that has actually done it right for you, or kind of got close, maybe?
Can you expand on it a little bit?
Yeah. So, like, say for example, the Blizzard example, where perhaps they're going down a certain pathway where, like you mentioned, like you've been manipulated to, just not enjoy, I guess, the overall experience. But like, is there a current player right now, like in the industry, where they're kind of doing those same maybe behaviors or following that same kind of trend, where it's about, like they've kind of got it right, like they kind of balanced it well in the commercial side, but still in the the overall gaming experience, and like you kind of like, okay, that's the way it's going now. That's cool. The multiplayers or what have you, but I still enjoy it. I'm still happy to like we said earlier, waste our time on this. Is there anything that has kind of, even amongst all of these that maybe are not doing that well in that sense, are there any few maybe games or anything else that is kind of like doing it for you right now?
Yeah, definitely. I guess it's just the balance, I used to play Destiny a lot. I don't do it anymore.
Mhm.
But I had a lot of fun with this game,
Yeah.
and as far as I know, it's not pay to win. You just buy
Mm.
cosmetics and stuff. Of course, I'm going away from grinds in games
Mhm.
because just don't have time. I would
Yeah.
rather do
Yeah.
something more productive, and but yeah, I really like Apex Legends, what Respawn did
Yeah.
with it. I never
Yeah.
played Titanfall, but I do love the universe.
Mhm.
Like Respawn, if anyone listens to me from Respawn, please look at my portfolio.
Yes, links are in the bio below, so please check it.
um, but yeah, I really like what they done with Apex. But it's just normal battle royale game.
Mm.
But I guess it's just my link is what I said with fantasy of the world.
Mhm.
I just love it. The setting, the fantasy,
Mm.
the what's going on. They put actual lore into this game, which I haven't seen before. To done and just shoot a video game.
Cool.
There is actual characters with their stories. They
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
comics for them. And with every battle pass that comes every 2 months, I believe they add up the story. And it's really cool. You feel much more immersed in it. And I'm the person who always connects with a character. Like I need to find somebody I connect with, and it's
Yeah.
gonna be
Yeah.
like my
Yeah.
main in a video game. And they don't disappoint to deliver. Like I mean Revenant, it is do you know Titanfall?
I'm familiar with it. Yes.
Do you remember they had a simulacrum Ash in there? It's almost like Ghost in the Shell thing. They
Okay.
put
Okay. Yeah.
a human mind into the
Yeah.
bottom like machine.
Mhm.
So this is the thing, and it just resonates with me a lot. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And
um,
so yeah, please.
oh yeah, I just wanted to say that there's definitely a lot of games which are good. I'm waiting a lot for. I believe Mortal Shell didn't come out yet, but or did it? Haven't seen it on Steam, but I was following Vitaly Bulgarov for like
Mm.
forever, and I'm just so in love with his work and really excited for this game. And again, their studio is indie studio, so I
Yeah.
feel like it's gonna be great.
And you mentioned earlier that like, I guess the state of the world overall and just all the little things happening, like it's not filling you with confidence. How is that like influence you as an artist? Because everything that happens around us and what we enjoy and what we don't enjoy, is technically, at least in a creative sense, so what we feed off, right? And obviously, you are what you eat. To use that kind of metaphor, and like I've heard artists mention before, like depending on their mood or experiences, it feeds right into their art. Like have you that does that happen to you? Is that something that you've noticed plays in your creative process?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like with the whole COVID situation started, there was a lot of times when I just wanted to make some kind of an awful character. Like, it feels everything feels quite oppressive to me at the moment. That's
Yeah.
why I literally started eating news. I turned this thing off. I
Mm.
don't use Instagram almost anymore. I don't use it. I stopped Twitter. But there was a lot of moments when I just wanted to make like oppressive characters that represent the authority, this kind
Mm.
of feel, because I don't have much trust in many things at the moment that's
Mm.
going on, and this constant feeling of being manipulated, you
Mhm.
know, it's definitely I I had some urges to put it into my art, but then I thought it's not gonna make me feel better.
Right.
It's
Right.
not gonna do anything. So I just stopped thinking about it and
Mhm.
distracted myself and just started, came back to basics, if you may call it, just
That's
started to
awesome.
fuel on more positive
Yeah.
things of what I like and things that I'm gonna do. Also thankful I have a lot of work to do at the moment. So
That helps. Yeah.
yeah, I don't really
Yeah.
have much time for personal work right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that's interesting to hear. That's great to hear, in fact, because quite often, let's say something is, like just to talk generally in terms, um, something is maybe a negative influence or something's not right. Like say in terms of mindset or just overall vibe, right? Um, like being able to either process it or being able to kind of like switch your attention in a way where it's positive, like that's a really really powerful tool to have, and it's great to hear that that's something that you employed. um like, what made you come to that conclusion? Is that kind of more how you are like as a person? Is that part of your personality, or is that something that you had to like really dig deep, or is it somebody who kind of mentioned something to you? I guess I would jumping onto more like the mental health side of things and just the overall like well-being. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that, and like how do you tend to keep yourself, I guess, on point and healthy in that particular realm?
Yeah, that's definitely a important subject these days.
Yeah.
um, I feel like that to come to this point, I had to come to my lowest point. Um, I was I was in the UK last winter,
Mm.
and we were on this super strict lockdown, like nothing
Yeah.
worked. And because it's not my country, I didn't have any friends, I didn't have my family. I was just in a house with my fiance, and
Mm-hmm.
like thank God I had him to talk to. But I felt really alone and closed off, and there is
Mm.
people haven't been allowed even to sit on the bench in the park, and that felt like I just almost felt at a depression point. And
Mm.
I just thought that, and some people told me that you just can't go on like this. And I was like, yeah, that's right, I can't. And I always try to be strong with things like this because I really try to do my best and not being a victim,
Mm-hmm.
not to kind of steer in self pity. So I just kind of thought, yeah, all right, let's focus on something else and cut myself completely from everything that makes me feel upset. And that was
Mm.
social media at that time. I was following a few accounts, like just artists, but they were posting a lot of COVID related stuff that the world's going down and
Mm.
everyone's gonna. But yeah, it's just was very depressing, and
Like a lot of doom
I
and gloom stuff, right?
yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm the person who's been like this for years. Like
Mm.
looking at our society, I always was feeling like, society is took the wrong turn somewhere, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just these pessimistic thoughts on top of other pessimistic thoughts. And I was thinking, okay, it's time to end this. And I
Mm.
cut everything down and focused on the things around me, what I have at the moment, and my work. And it helped a lot because at the end of the day, you and me, we're just one person.
Mm.
And you can't change the world alone.
No.
And it's much more better to focus on something that you can change and make better in your life or life around people, rather than care what happens. in like another side of the world that you are not connected to. Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally concur with that. And my perspective on that is that if that's something you want to do, that approach is the best way to do that. And it might not make sense because it's thinking, well, if you want to affect somebody, let's say, I don't know, on Mars, right? How can I do that by focusing on myself? But in doing so, by focusing on yourself, like you make yourself a better person, right? You have better tools to cope, to overcome problems, or quickly find solutions. Therefore, you become almost like an expert in resolving things. Therefore, you become a naturally a better influence on the people around you, and then those people do the same thing to other people, and before you know it, that person on Mars has been affected by people close to them. And normally, you're more often likely to be influenced more in a more profound way by people close to you, right? Then, whether people would like to admit it or not, then someone maybe who is distant. So it's like, it's great to hear, because I've had like my own personal journeys with this, not just only during COVID, but like through the past as well. And one of the conclusions that I came to, and that was more not in terms of more by accident as opposed to actual strategy, was like what you just did, is more a case of simplifying things, recognizing either intentionally or unintentionally things that are not, like are not feeding me with positivity or actually helping, and just turn it off if it was something that's kind of like I can control, or maybe just look in a different direction, metaphorically speaking, because you want to move forward, right? And then you realize that, like in a video game, if you're coming to a point in the level where you can't progress, you got to find that secret key to unlock, the hidden passage to keep going forward. The aim is to keep moving forward, right? So yeah, it's good to hear that, like you found and used the tools to do that. But just a final, I guess, topic on this one. Final question on this topic is like, even whilst doing that, like you mentioned, you had to hit a low point. Like, was that still a positive experience once you kind of got back to your usual self, or was it still difficult, even though you'd recognized these things and you turned off, like say social media, an example? Like, was it almost like an immediate change to being like, kind of quote unquote back to normal, or was it still a struggle to do so?
Let me think. I think I still keep the environment noise down, because even now, if I go through the news, gets me like scared. But again, that's what news are made for. They rule society based on emotions. That's what marketing does as well. You just need to wake up emotions in people, and I just constantly remind myself that everything that I get information from, like environment, like news, some social media stuff, all of this just tries to manipulate the person, the viewer, to do some actions, to get scared, for example, or to like, and I just still don't do this because I feel like it still affects kind of unhealthily for me. It's bad. But I don't feel bad anymore. I feel good. I'm focused on my work. I got goals to do, and I try to just influence things that I have control over, and not to worry that much about everything else, because we are, like you and I, the greatest asset that we got, and this is the only thing that we got control over, is our
Yes.
life.
Yes.
And you can say things to other people, you can do many things, but the only life you can change is yours. And I guess that's what everyone should focus on right now.
Well put. Jumping back a little bit to what we mentioned earlier about, like, I guess where the future's heading in terms of, like, I guess movies and games kind of touch upon the kind of merging, right? It's like Unreal Engine is probably one of the tools that might be employing that, especially when you look at Unreal Engine 5 and what people are doing. and how it looks like super artist friendly whilst allowing you to kind of like explore worlds and real-time art is just like a new kind of art form, right? And that looks like something where literally is one place where you can kind of like make a game, equally make a film, as Mandalorian is shown. You can make like cinematic experiences all in one place, which as like an artist, having everything in one tool or and whatnot is almost like that's what everyone's looking for, right? Like that magical, quote unquote, magical tool set where you can kind of create whatever and anything you want. So, like, I guess we were more talking about the future of art and creativity and how that is going to affect us as artists. But is Unreal Engine something that, and just real-time art in general, is that something that's kind of like exciting you right now?
Oh yeah, definitely. I actually downloaded it and I tried to run it on my PC, but for some reason it's just laggy, the interface and everything. And I didn't have quite time to work it out, but I've seen a lot of YouTube videos what people were coming up with in there, and that looks insane.
Sick.
I feel like in the future, what's gonna happen, and quite close future, we probably talk about like less than a decade. I feel like it will be very easy to come up with anything you'd like and it to be very good quality. But what's gonna separate, I guess, artists is their ideas.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I feel like it's been mentioned on a lot of podcasts before. This kind of mutual opinion people are coming towards. And yeah, because at the end of the day, people got different styles. And I remember talking about our station, a lot of things on our station looking quite alike. I feel like what's gonna separate artists is their own creativity, their own style, some kind of little details that they're putting in their work that other people not.
Yeah.
This is, I feel like it's gonna be much more complicated to be on top of the industry, as it was, let's say, 5 years ago. Like it's happening now. That's why I say as it was, because every year you can see the quality is rising. It's going up and up.
Yes.
Yeah, and I've been literally thinking about it the other day, like, oh God, that would be so cool if I just was born in the 80s or even earlier, so I could be from this generation, like, of artists who are in the industry for decades already.
Yeah.
And they got there so early. And it feels like it was so easy back then. And right now, I feel like also there is so many people now because it's so easy. You can just download software and sit at home, start doing things. You've got everything. You've got tutorials, you've got free courses. You don't even need to pay money these days. So definitely creativity is what's gonna separate very successful artists from just normal artists, I guess.
That is true. Yeah, it's like, I guess it's like a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because on one hand, like all these tools that are super accessible, that means on one hand you've got like so many, as we both can agree, creativity is awesome, right? Like, let's say it was never a profession, let's say it's just a thing that people did as a hobby, we'd probably still be doing it, and because it's so rewarding and it's just a perfect outlet for many things, not just that's like a different topic, I guess, but I'm sure we both agree being creative is awesome, right? So like having that access to people is great because they can explore that and enjoy that. I guess like in a commercial sense though, whereas before perhaps when you're being considered by a client and they've probably got like, let's say just for argument's sake, maybe 10 people that you're on a shortlist of. Now that shortlist is almost infinitely big, which poses its own problems because, like, do you have time to even look at all the options? And therefore, if you don't, how do you decide which options to look at? But then on the flip side, it's like, where do you think that, do you think it will change the landscape of then how art is made? obviously in terms of where's the good stuff going to go, perhaps, or just more like, I guess let's just talk about more about the commercial side of things, like, working for clients or being hired in the studio, etc., etc. Do you think that landscape will perhaps change now if there's way more artists to people choose from, and the tool sets are almost like universally used by everybody, so there's not so much necessity to hire a specialist into something because kind of everyone does everything? Do you think that will kind of completely change the landscape of, like, say, the working landscape?
That's a good question. I feel like what we need to put in the list is that experience matters, in my opinion. Like, there is some artists, who, and some companies mention it, that if you got no experience, but your portfolio is amazing, we hire you. But we can't say that that's everyone, right? And
Yeah.
I feel like experience definitely matters. And I feel like a lot of artists who's been working for a long time, they can say that, yeah, right now, if even I'm not talking about just skills like drawing, that you just know better how to do it, but it's just overall experience matters. It adds a huge upgrade to your skill in everything. And this is definitely important, I feel like. But again, will what I say be relevant like this in 6 years from now on? Because in 6 years, people who just getting started right now, they're gonna be, I'd say, quite experienced in 6 years, right? I feel like it's gonna definitely change. But what worries me is our artists will become expendable.
Yeah.
If it's gonna be infinite amount of artists who are just as good as any other, it means that, okay, this month we have this artist. If he gets sick or if something happened, let's hire another one, because there is just another one waiting around the corner. And this is not I'm not very excited about this, and I feel like it might be the case in the future. And in a lot of big companies with tight deadlines, that's what they do. As much as I've heard of, I didn't have an experience like this happen with myself, but I just heard like rumors from people who's been working in some of the companies and things. And of course, nobody's happy about this, because if you're an artist, but I feel like anyway, it comes to what we said earlier about creativity. I just hope to believe that as long as you do what you like and you put everything in it and you try to be better and be original in some case, but again, you can say if you put everything, you are original, because every person is original. You will get there. It is a simple answer for a difficult question, but I'm not sure I can put it like at any depth to it, because this is literally the only thing I can think of.
I think that's a great way to summarize it. In fact, it is like, let's say you do go on that, like thought experiment of, because we all do it, especially when you're starting out, like, like, where is this going to end? How am I going to get this? And when you add things like maybe our insecurities as artists, our anxieties of like, am I going to make it? Because there's always that feeling of, am I going to make it? And etc., etc., etc. Especially when you're starting out. Then maybe like when you've made it, it's a case of like, am I going to stay where I'm at? Or like, then you start thinking of retirement. There's always something that you have to worry about, right? But then, it's a case of like, when that is the case, the simplest answer and the most elegant answer is always the simplest, in terms of, okay, so what is actually, let's say everyone assumes that, let's say it's a dystopian situation, right? For example, and it's like, okay, everyone's going to be working crazy hours, and it's just a grind. There's not so much like to get from it. So then how do you get the best of that situation? Well, then, like you mentioned, like if it is a case of, well, at least I get to, as long as I'm focusing on what I enjoy and keep improving and trying to be, like you mentioned, original, then at least that's something that you can, like build upon, or that would be the thing that really makes it worthwhile. But even like in a utopian situation, I personally think that is the main goal, or that is probably the best pathway to take. Because there's many other pathways you can take, like maybe just to be commercially successful, or all these other different things. But for me personally, doubling down upon the things that you enjoy, the things that really like drive you, the things that you want to explore. Like when you start thinking of that, your primary motivation isn't the commercial side of things, isn't like, the technical side of things. It's that nice zone of just wanting to create. And then usually that's where your best stuff comes from. And then most likely that's where an audience would probably appreciate the most. So yeah, I think that's like, a great way to put it. And for yourself, like what are your goals, I guess, short term and long term at the moment?
At the start of the year, I made like a list of my goals for the year.
Yeah.
And I put in there, okay, Eugenia, you're gonna put 10 portfolio pieces of your personal work in a year.
Yeah.
And that was a mistake. And I did a bet with my friend that if I'm not gonna do it, I'm gonna buy him Oculus at the end of the year.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I didn't expect to have that much work, and my plan is crumbling down.
Oh
But
my God.
yeah, but my short-term goal was just to improve, to get much more experience
Mhm.
work-wise, and I'm doing like right now my client work is completely different style. Like I'm mostly drawing things,
Cool.
and I never thought I'm gonna do that. It's like a lot of line art and
Yep.
design. But again, I was thinking, anyway, it's cool as long as you feel challenged and you learn things.
Yeah.
So this is my biggest goal at the moment, is just to get better. I'm not looking at money. Thankfully, I don't need money that bad that I'm ready to accept any job. And
Nice.
I just want to learn and improve and just be better, be happy with myself, which is always difficult. You always feel like, oh, I'm not good enough. But I just learned that you need to push the thoughts away and just continue doing things that you want to do. At the end of the day, I always feel like if internet went down and our society just rolled back into hundreds of years, I would be doing something connected to what I do right now anyway.
Yes.
Like I would be making, I don't know, costumes for theater, anything
Yeah.
like this,
Yeah.
anything connected in any way possible, drawing on the walls. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
gonna do that. And it kind of just puts you in the peace of mind, that
Yeah.
whatever it is, you just gonna do what you gotta do. And it just makes me feel so happy and content, as I said, to be honest. I feel like people who have it, and we artists are very fortunate, especially at this point of time, like working remote and just loving what you do. This is a great gift that as long as I live, I see not many people have.
Mm.
What about my long-term goals is I am afraid most of it is the same. I do want to work on much more bigger projects
Yep.
that I'm passionate about. Like Star Wars is, I'm gonna do everything I can to work on some Star Wars related things. It's definitely happening. And yeah, I do hope to build a house at some point. I
Cool.
always wanted to design it with my fiance and build it ourselves.
Well, like
It is also
completely
in
from
my,
scratch, right?
yeah,
Sick.
yeah. I do feel like it's something cool to do, especially in a world where everything moves towards the rent. I feel like you need to, if you own any land at all, you gotta keep it.
Yeah.
I feel like with the trends I see, it kind of slipping away from people it's been taken away, so you gotta keep it. And it's really cool when somebody's just got a house. I come from Russia, from Moscow, and you probably know these kind of Soviet buildings where a very tall houses, just buildings built on top of each other, and you get very little space. Like I grew up in 40 square meter apartment with like my family, so it just feels like a very big part of life to kind of make your own thing like this. And it just feels very wholesome.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
it.
And it's built to spec as well, right? So it's completely your own space. Like, although you can purchase a home and make it your space, like being able to determine, like the size and where things are, that's literally completely home, right?
Yeah, and it kind of just reminds you of not simple human existence, but just kind of feels you that you own something. It's your land, your house. It feels important for some reason.
Yeah, and I guess like it's kind of like similar themes to the kind of like art philosophy we've been talking about in this episode, right? It's like it's kind of same way with art as well. It's like kind of own your own land and make the things within that you want to make.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I think that's a great note to end the podcast on as well. Thank you, Jenny, for your time. That was a great chat, and it's great to have you.
Thank you again so much for inviting. That was really exciting to talk to you, and I am very happy. I hope it was also some useful information for some people, or maybe cheered somebody up, or made the day go by easier. So yeah, I really enjoyed myself. Thank you so much.
A massive thanks to Eugenia for an amazing conversation. It was awesome to hear reviews on the topics we discussed today. Be sure to hit the links below and give her a follow. If you would like to share your own thoughts on some of the topics we discussed, then please do so in the comments below. Remember to subscribe, like and share, and if you want to embark on your own creative journey or make your art even better, then head on over to learnsquared.com and start learning today. All of our first lessons are free.